Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Surrounded by Details podcast. Let me put the speaker a little bit aside here, turn down the music a little bit, but I don't mind to have a few good tunes on the show. And before we start, as always, my name is Stevo. I am your host. I'm still adjusting my microphone. My apologies. We are once again on the road. Before we start, as always, a massive shout out to our supporter, Dreamcatcher Hostel Bar and Cafe, a lovely place if you want to stay in Bangkok, or if you already have a place to stay in Bangkok, then make sure to go there anyway, because it's a cool spot, cool people, and actually good music as well. And if you don't know how to get there, well, then maybe you should rent yourself a scooter from Fatboy Scooter Rental, also here in Bangkok. Shout out to my man London Kunde. I still don't know how to pronounce his last name. Maybe I'm butchering it. My apologies. But that's the place to go if you need a scooter, or even if you don't need one, just go there, because that's one of the funniest thing or most pleasant things to do when you are in Bangkok. But enough with shoutouts on this lovely September Tuesday, 26th of September. I'm sitting here, not in my studio. I'm sitting in the middle of the Black Jazz Spot, newly opened here in Bangkok, with Idris. How are you, Idris?
Fine, thank you.
It's a lovely place you have here. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much.
So, Idris, to explain a little bit to the audience who you are and why I have you on the show, you recently opened a new jazz spot. It's not your first spot, but you reopened, and as soon as I see or hear music, jazz music, I'm all in. I came to your opening. Cool music, cool vibes, a little bit overpacked though.
Yes, about 300 people in and out for the entire evening, but settled down after midnight, and we were able to do some meaningful music that we could hear ourselves.
I really enjoyed it, man, and that's normally what you get when you open a good place. You get a big response. So we were talking about this earlier, social media, and you need to learn all this kind of stuff, and I had to learn all this kind of stuff. How is it for you to actually involve a business like this in social media?
It's a lot of fun, actually, because before this, I didn't have much use for Instagram and Facebook. I'm still not on Twitter yet, but about to sign up this afternoon. It's a great way to reach everybody and very efficient.
Yeah, social media took me a while. I was very against it, and then once you realize how powerful social media is, you kind of have to. You get forced by the public. Enough of individuality. Do what everybody else does. I'm just kidding. You opened 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. When exactly did you have your grand opening? That's a while back.
The grand opening was on the 9th, but actually we've been going now for 2 months. This is the end of our second month. And how did you start the whole idea of opening a jazz spot? Can you tell me a little bit about that? About 4 years ago, I opened up the first Black the Jazz spot in a location that perhaps was questionable, but I needed a place to allow myself to play and all my associates, comrades who are like-minded in playing serious jazz outside of the hotels, outside of the restaurants, where we could stretch out and try to reach the heights that they reach in New York City, for example.
Where are you from exactly?
I'm from Harlem, New York.
Ah, so you are from the States. And how did you end up here in Thailand, in beautiful Bangkok?
About 17 years ago, I came for a holiday, lasted a month, and then I decided I wanted to come back. So a year and a half later, it's almost 16 years now that I've been back full time. And I just packed everything, got rid of my affairs back in the States.
That's normally how people end up here. They just say, okay, enough, and then they leave. But why jazz in Bangkok? Because Bangkok is not really a place where jazz makes sense. It's not the main music here, even though I have to say, in my experience, Thais are very musical. They play a lot of music.
And I would have to add that all Asians seem to be overly musical compared to the West. And I've been in Europe and the US. Very musical. But jazz was big back in 2002, and this is a little while before a lot of the political things started happening. Jazz was in a lot of the hotels, and I got a good impression that only lasted for about perhaps a year and a half before things started going the other way. But it was enough for me to see the potential here, and also to use this as a base to reach some of the other countries in Southeast Asia and beyond. And over the 15 years, that's what I've done to a certain extent.
That's nice. So do you work with only foreigners who play jazz music, or you also invite a lot of Asian people, Thais?
I almost work exclusively with Thai people, perhaps 99% with a Thai.
So how is the jazz scene? When did the jazz scene start in Thailand? Can you tell me a little bit about the history, or is that more like empty subject?
Well, no, the king that just passed away about a year ago was he had studied jazz as well and played a couple of instruments, most notably the saxophone. Had a chance to jam with Benny Goodman and a few other notables. And so there are 3 universities who are all trying to compete with each other, putting out the best jazz program. They offer graduate master's degrees in jazz studies and have quite extensive programs. And I think this would put them as one of the only major cities that would have 3 universities giving master's degree in jazz. Outside of New York City, I can't even think of another one that would. So they're putting out hundreds of musicians every year, jazz musicians. But once they graduate, there are very limited opportunities outside of the hotels. Most things are small. Most things won't support an energetic, honest, artistic presentation. So the market for me was wide open to try to replicate some of the environments that I came from back in the US.
Yeah, that is #always a student. You always learn something new. I know that the king was a big photographer. He has his own Leica model made out of gold. So he always had his camera with him. And I've seen a few pictures where he's playing an instrument, but I didn't know that he was so heavily into music. I think, if I now remember, he actually composed music as well. So a very artistic king, I have to say.
Yes, they've been playing his compositions for about a year now, pretty much everywhere, in honor of the mourning period.
Yeah.
And he composed about 40 songs from what I remember.
That is crazy. So do you think it's a good way to compete in music? Because you mentioned the universities here. Obviously, when you compete against somebody, it can push yourself to a higher level, to a better level, especially in sports that works. But does that work in music?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Because ultimately you need the financial support, you need institutional support. They build studios, they have amphitheaters, and a lot of good teachers, good teaching facilities. So they're putting out quality musicians. It could be one of the top 3 production cities outside of New York.
That's insane, man. I repeat myself. Insane is the word of the day for me. I'm sorry. But I didn't know that about the teaching program here. Is teaching music something that you could consider ever go into, or do you rather stay on stage and say you can learn by actually listening?
Actually, I'm teaching while I'm on stage to a certain degree, teaching what it actually takes when your feet are on the ground in front of the people. You can only get so much from the universities, and they are quite far away, so they don't really have a chance to impact the inner cities where the jazz is really going to happen. So I'm down here on the ground. They do their part and I do my part. And believe me, after they finish even their graduate degrees, they still have some things to learn from on the ground.
Oh, #always a student. You never stop learning. I think that is, I said it once, I believe, when I was talking to Yves Ting. He's a mixed martial arts fighter, and we were talking about what makes a master, what makes a great teacher. And I think it's the awareness of always being a student, that you never finish learning, which makes you a good master, because you constantly have to stay open-minded for new things and for the basic things, because you need the basics. In order to change the game, you need to learn to play the game, and once you can play it, you can actually start to reinvent it or to improve it or do whatever you want with it. Know your basics, that's what I'm trying to say. When you're on stage and you interact with your audience, how does it exactly work? Because jazz music, for me, especially jazz music, it's the same as salsa. It's very, very emotional, very interactive with your audience. I think does it work when you have an audience who's not really listening to the music, when you just have an audience kind of being in the bar and having the drinks and conversation, or is jazz music the kind of music that you really need to listen to?
Yeah, the latter. You really need to listen. It's our task to first create the listening environment, and then to put forth music that's worthy of listening to, put forth performances that are worthy of listening to, that are diverse even within one particular set, within 1 hour. Diverse, interesting, can cover a couple of ranges of emotion, and to keep the audience engaged. It's not very difficult, but it's something you have to know how to do. And going back to your always a student comment, Ron Carter, the bassist, who's probably the most recorded person ever, probably thousands of recordings. He told me right before I came here that when I told him I was just a student, he told me we're all still students. And for him to say that to me is something that I kept with me, and I'll probably never forget, because again, he's probably the most recorded person in jazz ever. Yeah, that's a part of being self-aware. You have to realize that all of us, you, me, whoever it is, we are all walking the planet for the very same time in the very same moment. Nobody has lived before. Now, even though a couple of people will state they come from a former life, you know what I mean? But we all experience the very same minute right now for the very first time, and I hope you guys listening enjoy this conversation about jazz music. But in order to get where you are today, we also need to talk about your past. You come from Harlem, New York. Did you always have music around you, or is it something you had to discover by yourself? No, I came from a jazz family, so to speak. My father, his name was Al Barrymore, later changed to Talib Daoud. He started the Messengers Band, which 2 iterations. One was the Messengers Band, and the second was the 17 Messengers. They were a big band who tried to implement bebop in a big band setting in the late 40s, and both times with limited success, perhaps lasted a year. But the original guys were Thelonious Monk, Kenny Dorham, Sonny Rollins, my father, Art Blakey, and a few others. So, and they got the book from Dizzy Gillespie to play some of his charts. So after that didn't work, my father became a trumpeter in Dizzy Gillespie's big band in the early 50s, when Dizzy was touring with the United Nations and interacting with the Cubans when they played selections such as Manteca, A Night in Tunisia, etc. Trumpeter Lee Morgan was also in the band. My father was his teacher. My stepmom was Dakota Staten, and she was a jazz singer on Capitol Records, and she sang with George Shearing mostly. Had a hit song called The Late Late Show. So I came from this environment when I was a child, growing up in Harlem, and all the jazz greats were over our house, over our wherever we were surrounded by them, basically. My father was friends with a lot of them because he was also their spiritual teacher. Middle Eastern things, African things. We had an African artifact shop. And so that lasted until I finally moved a little bit later to Cleveland, Ohio with my mother, and got away from jazz and started listening to other things. After that, I grew up pretty much as a rock and roller. Oh, that's interesting. I skipped over the Motown stuff and went straight to rock and roll. Can you explain exactly to the audience, and also recap for myself a little bit, what exactly is bebop? Because I've been reading Miles Davis' biography, and bebop is something that comes up a lot of times. How did that develop into jazz music, then maybe funk music later on, the history of jazz? The proper name was modern jazz. A group of guys used to gather after hours in a Harlem bar called Minton's Playhouse. Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, etc. And they wanted to play things other than what they were playing on the gig for their jobs in the big bands. Again, almost like my situation here in the hotels. They were playing cabarets, and they wearing blue suits, powder blue suits and things like that. And so they wanted to get away from that and play for themselves. So this revolution started with primarily those 3 and a few others up in Harlem, and they called it modern jazz. Bebop was sort of like, not really a derogatory term, but a little bit of a put down, a subtle put down, but it stuck. and bebop became a sort of music which tried to extend Western jazz vocabulary, extend Western jazz harmony, chords and such, using notes that are not in what we call the diatonic scale, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, the notes in between. So bebop made use of this and faster rhythms and complex drum rhythms, and it grew and finally is the basis of all the jazz that we listen to now. It had a next revolution. They would call it hard bop, and then they would call it post bop. But all of those changes are what we're playing. A little bit of each now. The root was bebop back in 1942, specifically in Minton's Playhouse.
I like the fact that you mentioned the term harmony, because a lot of people who are not listening to jazz regularly, they can often state that jazz doesn't sound like harmony at all. It's a little bit wild here and there.
Every culture is trained on a particular type of harmony. So the Chinese listen to things that we would classify as a pentatonic 5-note scale. We have an 8-note harmony-based music system that came from Europe, actually, the Bach, classical. But there are notes in between the 5 notes, in between the 8 notes, that jazz makes use of, and everyone is not used to that harmony. So it takes listening as education. It takes having this grow within you to understand the intervals that one particular interval they would call the tritone, which will be the note right in the middle of the 8. Right in the middle of the 12 notes, and it doesn't sound nice if you listen to it in isolation, but the purpose of jazz is to make those intervals that provide a whole lot of tension, to resolve them and take you in and take you out and take you back in. Sort of like...
So you could, sorry to interrupt, so you could refer to jazz as problem solving in a certain way.
Exactly, problem solving, but creating the problem and then solving the problem. So making you feel a bit uncomfortable and then making you feel good again. It's sort of like a massage.
Oh, interesting comparison. Who doesn't like a good massage?
But in some instances, the massage may feel a bit uncomfortable, but then you feel better. Jazz does that in and out, and the most creative and the most advanced jazz artists know how to go out with the music and make you kind of turn your head a little bit, and then they resolve it and bring it back in. So tension and resolution.
So can you say that you kind of guide the audience into an uncomfortable place and a comfortable place? And do you push your audience sometimes to see how long they can stay uncomfortable? Because that is something that I would wonder. Nobody likes to be uncomfortable.
Well, I don't want to call it uncomfortable, because after a while, some things that made you feel uncomfortable, whether it's something you've eaten or something you're feeling, after a while you get used to it. And like I said in the beginning, all cultures are trained a certain way. So we're trying to make that uncomfortableness be something that you now enjoy. And so we push you into that area, and then we pull you back into things that you normally would enjoy. For example, if people are not used to eating Greek yogurt, for example, after a while, they learn to appreciate.
It's like beer. When you have your first beer, you don't really like it, and then you get older, you have a couple of more, and then you start to enjoy beer.
Absolutely.
Or your first cigarette, unfortunately. That's a bad example. However, how long maybe it's a stupid question, but when you learn to play an instrument, how long does it take to actually realize how to use that instrument? Because it's not enough with actually just know how to play it, how to use it with your audience, how to move with your audience. Where did this switch come for you? Let me phrase this a little bit different. When did you start to learn your first instrument?
I started when I was about 8 years old. I started with the trumpet, but it was inner city and pretty much low level in Cleveland, Ohio. And after a while, I just put it down and went into other things, primarily sports. So that went away. I picked it back up as an adult because I went to university for engineering and computer science and worked in that field for almost 2 decades before I finally picked up a saxophone in the late 80s for 5 years, and then changed to trumpet because the sound of the trumpet started coming back to me. I started feeling it more, so I put down the tenor and then tried to learn the trumpet again.
You say you were into sport there, or went into sport as well. Unfortunately, I got to know today that you're a Manchester United supporter. That broke my heart a little bit because I'm a Bayern Munich fan, but it is what it is, I guess. How well do you have to exercise and train? Because I see you are in shape, and it takes a lot of lung capacity to actually play the trumpet or the saxophone. And you do also sing.
Yes, as well. The singing doesn't take much exercise, but the playing of the trumpet is very physical, and your success depends on how you handle that physical demand. So you have to practice a lot, not necessarily with running or anything like that, but just practicing blowing a lot on the horn. People get dizzy when they blow at the amount that we have to blow, even when they blow at the amount that a flute player would have to blow. Your first impulse is to get dizzy between 19 and 35, but closer on the younger end, skewed on the younger end. So they're all young, and a lot of them do smoke. From time to time, people don't want to hear about their personal habits, so I focus on the music, and you can only fight so many battles.
That's true. You have to learn to organize your fuck budget, and I have been talking about this a couple of times. Sarah Knight had a TED talk about how to organize your fuck budget, what to give a fuck about and what not. Some things you just need to let it go, because you have to realize, no matter if it's a good habit or bad habit, that's who you are, that's what you're made of. If you start to look too deep into things, you get lost, and then you lose the whole focus of life, which is enjoying and improving. How long does it take to put together a proper band? I mean, you have guest players as well. Last time you had a piano player here. How long does it take to actually fit a band together? Or is that somebody can just jump in and you feel it, you feel each other, and you know, okay, we can go there, but we can't really go there because that's not your strength. I can do that. How long does it take to you to feel your band?
It's the latter, because I don't have a band per se. There are probably up to 25 people who I collaborate with, all Thai people here in Bangkok, and whoever can make it that night. I need 3 people: a pianist, double bass, or a guitar and a drummer, a saxophonist sometimes. 2 nights ago, I had a saxophonist I'd never met, so he joined the band, and a drummer I'd met only one time, and a new bass player, so everyone was new. You have to be responsible. If you show up, you're responsible to be at a certain level, and we start off with a couple of songs, and then I can gauge who can do what from the first few songs, and then you try, and you get out on the edge, and there may be a couple of mistakes, but
that's part of the progress. Nothing is perfect. It's like a good marriage. You need to fight, says the one who is 32 and not married, but you need to fight in order to develop. It always comes down to the same point: develop. Reminds me a lot of my days, back in the days when I used to dance, b-boying. You have DJs and you have the dance floor, and you start to interact and you learn how the DJ plays, and the DJ learns your movement, and it kind of has to fit together, you know. You become a team at a certain point. I enjoy that a lot with music. That is what makes me sick, for the lack of a better word, but sick with new music, because I have the feeling that people don't really appreciate true and good music anymore. Everything is done on a laptop nowadays. How do you compare music back in the days to today's music?
Well, of course, they didn't even have the advantages of CDs and MP3s or any sort of portable recording, but they had to still implement what they heard from other people playing. This is the best way to learn jazz, much superior than going to the universities. So you listen to recordings any way you can. I just have no idea how they did it in the 30s and the 40s. But you listen, and then you copy, and then from copying you grow. The saying is that a good jazz musician copies, a great jazz musician steals.
Okay.
So you steal the ideas, you make them part of your own. Perhaps more than likely the people you're stealing the idea from are already dead, so they want you to use their ideas. You steal those ideas, and it grows within you into something else. It always it evolves into something else, and that's how you grow. So in the past, they had to learn this way, and now it's still better to learn this way. Of course, taking advantage of technology like MP3 and things that are already online, but but there's nothing wrong with technology per se. Even I use software to compose songs. I've composed 45 songs, and I've used software to compose songs. You still, a lot of it, the most important part still has to come from within you, from your artistic education and from your experience, or else it's going to end up sounding like just composed on a laptop.
But speaking about education, that is basically one of my points, because nowadays people don't really realize the history about music anymore. That's what I mean. You have a lot of electronic music, and they just push one button and then another button. Of course, there needs to be a certain talent as well, but never forget your roots. And I think to know the history of music, the kind of music you play, is very important to be able to perform your kind of music at the best possible level.
I think there are some people who are going back and studying, even in the modern using modern technology, right? Creating hip hop or just creating dance music, house music. I think they're still studying some of the artists who created the things that they're taking samples from in the past. And those are the ones that are going to rise above the ones who are just trying to create off the top of their head without any sort of background, any sort of reference. So I think that's what's going to separate those who make it from those who aren't.
Another question, maybe a little switch here, but is it possible to be a very, very, very good musician at a young age? Because people say you're not really grown up until you're 25, and then when you turn 30 you realize, I didn't know a shit when I was 25, and so on. So do you think it's even possible to be a real good musician and know exactly what you're doing when you were young, or is that something that comes with talent? I don't really believe in talent. I believe in hard work and practice. But what is your opinion on that?
You stole my line. I have a 17-year-old pianist who just turned 17 in March, I believe, or April, and he's phenomenal. But I always tell him it's not your talent, it's your personality. He has the personality where he wants to practice and perhaps do nothing else. He's Thai. His name is Roy Kian. He's getting a name for himself already, and he plays with me every other Friday here at Black. He's phenomenal, but it's because he practices, and if I tell him to learn the song A, B, and C, he'll go and learn the introductions, the endings, and again, like you said, that's not talent. That's perhaps talent that's created from the hard work, going back and doing and caring about. So it's personality, those who can make them apply themselves, make themselves do what is necessary. A lot of guys who graduate with their master's degree and they're already 24 and such can't play the introductions and the endings and the details that this 17-year-old guy who hasn't even gone to music school, he cares enough to learn the things that I point out to him. So yeah, at an early age, if your personality will support it, if you're more mature than your peers, you're more mature than your age group, yeah, of course you can. But that is an exception to the rule. He's probably the only 17 or 18-year-old one.
Yeah, it takes dedication. But is it with music? There's a saying, Annie Leibovitz, one of the most famous photographers, was shooting with the Rolling Stones for a very long time, and she once said, photography is nothing that you turn on or off. It's something that is constantly there. It's the same for me. When I walk the streets, I constantly see in different lenses. I see a 50mm when I look at that. I see a 24-70mm when I look at that. So there's a different perspective. With music and dedication, and this is where, in my opinion, hard work comes from, when this starts to actually grow inside of you, that you constantly feel what you like to do. A good example, B-Boy Nagin, part of the Red Bull BC All-Stars, background dancer for Madonna. He's a good friend of mine, and he is constantly dancing. No matter where he is, he walks the shopping mall or he walks the grocery store, he's always having a little beat in him and just moves forward so smoothly. DJ Lucas Benjamin from Red Light Radio, More Bounce Collective, the same thing. They just breathe music all the time, and that's what you need to do, or that's who you need to become in order to put this work and dedication in, because otherwise it becomes work, and that's where it's very dangerous. Did you ever reach a point where you had the feeling, I'm getting tired of this?
No, not at all. And to be honest, back in the States, we listen a lot more than the guys do here. Before, everyone carried around a little iPod or something like that, MP3 player, but now everyone wants to listen on their phone, but of course their phone is for 2 or 3 other things that are more important than listening to music. And so they don't listen to a steady stream of music, and I'm actually surprised even some of the advanced musicians haven't heard some of the artists that I referred to, or some of the recordings that I referred to that we would consider essential back in the States. So I had the advantage of being a listener, and just in your car and with your iPod and everywhere you go. So I was like that, but the musicians nowadays, most of them are not like that. They're too busy with other things, trying to hustle, trying to make money. But every musician should keep a small, like an iPod Nano in their pocket, and not try to listen on their phone, because listening has to be with you and to make you grow, and to make sure you understand what the older artists did, the other artists, the legends did, because ultimately what we're trying to do is stay within the same vein and not take jazz somewhere else that it's not supposed to be.
Yeah, I lost my thread here. I was about to say something. 2 things actually, and now I forget both of them. What am I doing? Listening to music. Carrying around an iPod, I agree, but actually listening to music takes a little bit more for me. I need to sit down, I need to have a proper record player, I need to put on the record and actually sit down and listen, because even if you listen to music on your MP3 player and you're in the BTS, you constantly get distracted. What do you do to actually really listen to music? Do you do that at all, or is it just me being crazy?
No, we spend a lot of our time in the day, even if we're out and about, sitting and waiting and riding on transportation. So you'd be surprised how much still time you have to listen, even when you're out and about. But you have to train yourself to focus on the music that is playing. It can't be just background in your ears. You have to focus on it and play it again, rewind it. So it's listening, I think, is 50% of the job, and it's the 50% that a lot of people are missing.
So are you happy when you go to bed at night and finally have silence for yourself, or is that something missing? Because sometimes when I have a busy day, I cannot just cut off and go to bed. I need to have something running on the side, let it be a stand-up comedian or some music, and kind of my body slowly needs to come down. How is that for you, who's constantly confronted with sounds and composing and doing music?
No, that thought has never crossed my mind. I'm usually away from music by the time I go to bed. Probably the last thing I do is try to catch up on the news,
which
will
will
put me to sleep. And so
so you catching up with the news because you want to know what's going on, or because it's so boring that it actually puts you to sleep and becomes a sleeping pill?
Oh no, I'm a news junkie.
Oh yeah, that can be dangerous. That can be dangerous. So talking about news, short side section here. How happy are you to not be in the States with Biggity Donald D. Trump as a president?
Well, actually, this Donald Trump confirms that I'm probably the smartest person in the world, because I left 15 years ago knowing.
Yeah, you knew it. You saw it coming.
What was coming. So everybody's now learning, but they're 15 years behind me. So.
Are you missing the States? How often do you go back?
No, have not been back. Sorry. My apologies to anyone.
If the audience could see you right now, he says this with a huge smile on his face. You are happy where you are. That's I like that. That's very important.
Well, I wouldn't be able to open up a jazz club in the States. Jazz musicians are not on the upper spectrum of financial stability. But another reason that has kept me in Bangkok is because of the economy. You can get some things done that you would have to be very well healed or well endowed to do back in the West, whether Europe or the U.S. So this project is quite reasonable for the facility that I have. As you see, we're sitting in here. It's quite reasonable, and it's still a risk, but it's a risk that I can take because I'm here in this sort of an economy. I couldn't do it back home.
Yeah, that's when people ask me about how is it to live in Bangkok. I always say I like the city because it gives everybody a possibility to survive, no matter if you are a beggar and need food, or if you are artist. Like if you are from a more poor side. Sorry if I put this in wrong words, but I hope everybody gets me. And you want to earn some extra money, for example, as we did back in Germany when we did street shows with b-boying, you always needed papers at some point. There were always a cop coming up, and you are not allowed to play your music here. Here in Bangkok, you kind of are allowed to do so, and that is what I like with the city. And it's called the City of Angels, the original City of Angels, not as LA or the Venice of the East. It's a very beautiful city. What would you consider the pros and the cons of living in Bangkok?
First and foremost, livability, economically speaking, but then livability, safety-wise. The crime level here is just negligible compared to the inner cities, the big cities, the major cities in which I lived. And I lived in quite a few because, again, I was an IT consultant for a couple of decades, and I was a road warrior, so I lived in all the big cities.
Not a keyboard warrior, a road warrior.
East Coast to West Coast, lived in all the big cities. So, but the livability here, the newness of the infrastructure, the residences and the transportation modes, the trains, the taxis, the affordability. So you don't really need a car. In fact, the car is not even recommended. And again, the ability to be able to survive as a jazz musician. Jazz musicians, one of my teachers told me, "You're going to be poor." If I switch from IT to jazz, and I didn't believe him, and he was right. You're gonna be poor. You're gonna struggle. So. Bangkok is where you want to be.
But that's why artists often are so strong mentally, because they go through a lot of struggle. And I believe I speak for all kind of artists, no matter if you're a writer, if you're a photographer, if you're a musician. There's always setbacks. There's always times where nobody really wants to hire you and nobody really wants to pay for your craft, even though everybody wants to use your craft. A lot of people don't know the value and time you put into your art form, which you perform or what you do. It's a big underestimate. But with the internet, I have to say that changes a little bit, and more people become aware of, hey, wait a second, why does my Instagram filter not look like this photograph from Tim Tadder, a crazy talented sports photographer? There's so much more behind it. So what actually made you choose jazz? I mean, if somebody comes and says, hey, if you choose route A, you're gonna struggle a lot, and if you choose route B, you're gonna be comfortable. Again, people don't like to be uncomfortable, but life begins at the end of your comfort zone. What made you choose route A, jazz, instead of route B?
Well, regarding uncomfortability, I sort of embrace it in a lot of different things I do. For example, working out. I would like to work out with heavy weights, which is very uncomfortable. And I just, some people are pain freaks, I guess. So jazz has been a lot of pain, especially if your well-being and your livelihood depends on it. I didn't choose jazz, and I didn't choose the trumpet. They sort of chose me. And there is a saying that your instrument chooses you. You hear it. Again, I wanted to play saxophone like John Coltrane. He's my main influence. And after that would be Branford Marsalis and Joe Henderson. Those three before any trumpet players. But the sound of the trumpet live with a quintet, the sound of the trumpet kept coming back to me, and I had to change. So, but then I had to play jazz because it's the only, I wanted to so bad. I didn't go to a lot of jazz clubs when I wasn't a musician because I didn't like watching other people play and not being able to play myself, and I finally went ahead and took the plunge.
Yes. Would you compare it to a love story? Because you can always say, I'm into this kind of girl, long hair, nice body, but then something completely different comes across and it just hits you. And it's, as you say, you don't choose your woman chooses you. The same with the instrument, correct? Maybe a weird comparison, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a little weird. No, I think you choose your woman.
All right. Well, everybody is different. I like to be open-minded. But your instrument, how valuable is your instrument to you? Me and my camera, we would sleep in the same bed if I wouldn't be too weird, but I try to not do it. I'm just joking, of course. But what is your relationship with your instrument? Is that something you always carry around, or is that something that you can just put aside for a while sometimes?
Well, I have two instruments. One is the voice, because I sing half the time. I sing 50%, and the trumpet. The trumpet in general, I change trumpets a lot because I like to experiment with different sounds, different feels. So when I can afford it, I change trumpets a lot. I'm not attached to it from that perspective. If someone calls me to do a gig and just sing, I'm a bit happy because I don't have to carry the trumpet and carry the mics and things like that. So I can do either or. If they call me just to play and not sing, I'm happy from a different perspective. Performing, I wish I played more instruments, so it wouldn't be just a trumpet. I wish I could play the drums. I feel like I'm more natural drummer than I would be even on the trumpet. I wish I had done drums at the same time, and then piano, of course. So it's an attachment, but not an exclusive attachment.
You think it's too late to learn a new instrument because you're so into your trumpet, or why haven't you ever gotten really into learning the drums or the piano?
Time, believe it or not, is still on my list of things to do. Piano is probably more than drums now. It's still on my list of things to do, but time just gets away from you, and unless you have to be financially stable, financially solid, comfortable, where you don't have to worry about that part of your life. Then you can spend time not chasing the dollar or whatever, and trying to grow through other aspects.
But speaking about time, you play a lot of music. How does that now work out with actually running a spot as like the Black Jazz Spot here? Because you have open every day except for Monday, correct?
Yes.
How much time does that take from your average day?
It takes up every minute. As soon as you wake up, you check the list of things. Now I have to write things down, make a list. It takes up every minute of your day, to be quite honest. I honestly haven't watched a football game this season. So, and I'm a huge fan. But it takes up all your time. I'm here during the day doing little things inside the bar, and even the staff don't even know, and they come. So things have changed. Then there's always practice. I have to go back and practice. I have to exercise. The older you get, the more you have to exercise. So these little things, and they take up so much time. It involves transportation, doing things on your computer, printing things out, sticking things, hammering things.
And you're painting things now at the moment too here.
Painting yesterday, yes. Painting and hanging acoustic treatment. So it's a lot of things to do, yeah.
That's very interesting. But are you doing all this alone, or do you have a partner? Do you have somebody who helps you? Tell me a little bit about your team and how you choose your team, because you cannot just put anybody in there. It's like a band. You need to work together. You need to make this happening somehow.
Yes, we have a team. I have 2 other partners, and then a support team involving about 3 or 4 others. And so, no, I'm not, by all means, not doing all this alone. Some people are taking care of the marketing and for the heavy lifting inside the bar with regard to renovation or implementation of some things. We have some staff as well.
So when you opened Black, what was your goal? What did you want to create? Did you just want to have a pub where people can listen to good music and where you have a spot to play, or what was the vibration you wanted to bring into the place?
No, I'm trying to compete directly with jazz bars in New York.
Okay.
And that's
how does that work? Because they're so far away.
I mean, compete as far as quality is concerned.
Okay.
So I reach for the highest level. When people talk about London, they talk about Ronnie Scott's, and when they talk about New York, they talk about Smalls, Village Vanguard, Blue Note. I want them, when they talk about Southeast Asia, this whole region, I want them to talk about Black, the jazz spot. So I opened it to compete. I'm very competitive with regard to music and sports.
Yeah, because you love
everything.
Sports, yeah. If you're a Manchester United fan, you have to be competitive. Which I think, by the way, is very unusual for American to be into real football. Not the football in America, because that isn't, they don't even use a foot, except for the kickoff maybe. But real football is played in Europe, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm sorry, but the best team is still Bayern Munich and will always be playing PSG, Paris tomorrow. I don't know, who's Manchester playing? Are they playing in the Champions League this year?
Yeah, they go to Russia. They go to Moscow.
That's a cold place to be. You gonna watch?
Absolutely, yeah.
Again, you need to make the time for the important things in life, which in this case is Champions League week. I had another question competing about jazz and Black. What is your audience? How do you reach your audience in Bangkok? Because I mentioned it at the beginning of this episode. You were packed at your opening, and were you surprised, or did you know, okay, we're gonna have a very heavy night? Which, by the way, I have to say, I talked to a bunch of people and everybody had a good time. Some people were complaining a little bit that it was too full because of the bar took a while, but I think your staff handled it very well for somebody who pays attention to the details. That's why we call this podcast Surrounded by Details. So shout out to your bar staff. They had a really good job.
Yes, I was absolutely shocked because the numbers got up to close to 300 and we were expecting 100 or below for the grand opening. So it was actually scary when people started just streaming in groups of 6, 7. But we're very happy that happened. It hasn't been quite that busy since, but steadily growing.
Yeah.
And I believe in due time we're going to be packed again, not at those numbers.
Never say never.
I'm hoping to be packed to the point where I can build a mezzanine because that would be really cool and very unique. It wasn't my intention to have a pub per se. I'm thinking more along the lines of a club, proper club. My audience is, before at my previous place on the Sukhumvit area, was expats primarily, and say 25% Japanese. But now it's 90% young Thais because I'm in the Tonglo area, and it's really been a shock. I told my two partners that there weren't going to be any Thais because there were no Thais in my first bar 4 years ago. But now that we're on Tonglo, it's 90% young Thais who have exposure to jazz from university or going to school abroad or whatever, and they're the ones that they pay attention. I'm surprised that they're attentive. They stay for 3 sets.
Watch out with the cables here, just with your hand, because the table is moving.
They stay for 3 sets. They return. They're repeat visitors. So for now, and I depend on the Japanese audience, but that's been only about 5% so far. I think that's going to grow. So far, the expat audience has been another 5%, perhaps plus or minus. But it's surprisingly now we're being held afloat by the younger. And I would say younger meaning 32 or below.
Well, maybe that's not surprisingly, maybe that's the result of good work and good networking, because that's what you need. And I have to say, it's very easy to find, by the way, because as you mentioned, we're in the Tonglo area, and you are in the back road here, but Soi 25, just take a right at the end of the road, Leo Kwa Pak Soi for the people who speak Thai. Very easy to find, and very, very flexible to move on to other spots. And moving on to other spots, that is the first thing that hit me when I came here for your opening, because you chose to place your little stage right next to the door. Isn't that something that is annoying when people go in and out and in and out?
Oh, no, not at all. We don't even notice it. The first impression we want them to get is the impression of the band, and not looking at the band from a distance when they open the door. Another thing that's absolutely crucial is setting the stage as far away from the bar as possible, so that the two noises don't
interfere each other.
Yes.
Yeah, when you walk in here, you basically are immediately on the stage. It would not surprise me if people start applauding every time somebody comes in because they think it's a new musician. I like that. It's surprisingly, I wondered, but I like the whole setup here in the bar. Also with the lights in the evening, it's very smooth and it's excellent for photos, man. That's how we, by the way, get in touch, because when I read about your opening, I was immediately, hey, music, good stage. Let's figure something out. I would love to take photos here one evening. Also, I see photographs hanging around from different places. Are you a big photographer fan?
I am. I don't do any photography on my own, but yes, I'm a fan of any sort of art, especially the old Renaissance European paintings and things like that, even outside of photography. But yeah, I love art in all forms. I'm an art junkie.
So what would you say has art, and of course especially jazz music, given to your life? How would you pass that knowledge on to other people, what art can do for your personality and for you in life?
I think it makes you a better person, a peaceful person, not one hung up on politics and war and chasing after the wealth unnecessarily. I think art makes you, the coolest people are the artists.
Yeah, that's true. We are very we're judging, but it's true. No, I agree. I like interesting people who have a journey. That's also what I like with the podcast. I like to hear other people's journey and how they got here. Do you consider to take this to the next level and open a different jazz spot somewhere else, or extending, or do you just want to make this one spot the hotspot of Southeast Asia, maybe even Asia, maybe even the world, maybe even the universe?
No, I'll keep just only one place, because I'm mostly the nightly host, although I will expand. And again, there's plenty of room in this space for a second level, a mezzanine, if we get too busy. But once you have something that's working, you have to stick with that and develop it to its full potential. There's a room in the back that we're going to make a cigar lounge.
That would have been my next question.
Yeah, there's overflow. We can have overflow back there as well. We can expand. I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we're so packed that we need a bigger place. And if that happens, okay, we'll address that when it comes. But yeah, I want to stay in one place for a long time.
Well, with that being said, brings us back to the opening, because that was very close. But I wonder about your room in the back, because that's kind of far away from where the action happens, where the music happens.
We will pipe the music back there, of course. And but sometimes people want to get away from the actual visual band that's playing if they still can hear the music and also talk a little bit more. But a lot of people come to just hear background music and smoke cigars and have a single malt. And that's what the back room is going to be eventually. Very
interesting. And having a talk is also what we had at your opening when you had a little break. You were running in and out, stressed but very calm. You were not different from today at all. You were a very calm person, very easy to talk to. And we had a small conversation outside, and correct me if I'm wrong, because my memory can fail me sometimes, but we were talking about women on stage. Is that something that you would mind if I bring that up? Because you said something like, I will never have a woman on stage.
I didn't. No, I didn't.
Maybe that's just me remembering wrong, but
no, I didn't say that.
Explain yourself.
No, because I've already asked a Japanese singer and a pianist what night would they like to perform on the early set, and there are a Thai guitarist and a Thai pianist, jazz. This is more of a musician's place more than a singer, so I was referring to just having lady singers.
Okay.
Having women singers, like the hotels are more inclined to do.
Okay, my bad. Sorry. Hashtag no feminist.
That seems to be my stepmom Dakota Staten was a jazz singer, so I learned a lot. I learned a lot of my jazz from Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan, just listening to them. So it's not a singer would have to be really offering something different than the normal singers, and she would have to be true to jazz and don't go close to the crossover mode. A very creative jazz singer. I like Vanessa Rubin, for example, or Betty Carter. Someone like that, of course, could get on my stage, but some of the ones who are not really at that level or
heading towards a different direction.
Right. They cater to the hotel audience because they like to do crossover,
a little
jazzy
bit of cover
things. Yeah. We can't have that at all, either as an instrumentalist or as a singer.
Yeah, that makes sense. You need to create your style, and you need to make sure that you get recognized by your style. Once again, if a good photograph is not often not recognized by the subject that is taking a photograph of, it's about the style that you create. It's an important part of the business. So that was me just maybe having one beer, or maybe even 2 beers too many. I really had a good time when I was here for your opening. Unfortunately, I hadn't made it back yet. I was very close to come by yesterday because it was my birthday yesterday, but then I realized, wait a second, it's Monday. Idris said he doesn't have open on Monday. Do you have live bands every day except for Monday, or do you only have specific days where you have live bands in?
Right now, just on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We have solo pianists on the other 3 nights. All 6 nights, actually, we have solo pianists. But slowly but surely, we're going to roll out the other days and have live bands, probably going to add Thursday, Wednesday, and then Tuesday. But right now, just those 3 weekend nights.
Yeah. Is jazz the kind of music that you can listen to all the time, every day of the week, or is it like a good wine that needs a steak sometimes, that you can only have a certain drink with certain foods?
Typical jazz fans back in the States will go to the jazz club or jazz bars every night. I certainly did when I was living in New York right before I came here, and also when I was in Atlanta. No, it's going to be different. The show should be different. So yes, it's a place to hang out. You could do it every night. I wish people would do it every night. Surprisingly, when I was in Beijing in 2005 and 2006, and for 8 months, I would see the same people every night in a place that was packed. Almost 500 people per night. Over those 8 months.
I can see that, man. I'm like that with food. If I have food that I really enjoy, I eat it every day until it comes out of my ears. It's just a really, really bad habit. But Idris, what is the plan for you for the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months? We're gonna face a little bit more quiet month of October because we have the King's Cremation coming up. So what are your plans until the end of the year? What can you recommend to our listeners, and what can you say to the people out there in biggity Bangkok? Why should they come to Black?
It's a big change from what you're normally going to get in Bangkok, and especially on Thong Lor. After you've had a lot of the other excitement and you just want a place to sit down and chill with a nice beverage. Pretty soon we're going to implement food. Very soon, probably this week.
Thai food or Western food?
No, Western food.
Okay. What kind of Western food is your favorite food?
It's going to be a few pasta selections.
Oh, you get me.
With different seafood on them and things like that, and some tapas, finger food. Nothing that's going to take a lot of knife and fork action per se, because we don't want the noise on the plates. But just we'll start off with things simple and see how we can expand it. No burgers, fries.
Don't make it too complicated, just finger food for the people to just grab it and have a conversation. Otherwise, it also brings more work with it. You have to do the dishes, you need different machinery and all this or more staff, depends on. It's very difficult. My father is a chef. I'm very spoiled with food, but pasta, man, I'm sold. I'm all in. I'm a huge pasta fan. Not apparently not so good for your body as many people would think, but fuck it, it's good. And yes, I just said fuck. You're allowed to swear on this podcast once in a while. Talking about once in a while, where before we started this podcast, you told me you were featured in a magazine in Germany, all the way in Europe, in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. How did you end up there?
Is it it's a newspaper?
Newspaper, yes? Sorry. It's just my lack of English. # not a native English speaker.
Yes, they for my first bar, a reporter just happened to stop in, and she was traveling between here and Vietnam. And so along her travel, she made it a point to come back to Bangkok. She had contacted FAZ newspaper, Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung.
Allgemeine Zeitung, yeah.
Okay. She contacted them, and she submitted a feature story, and they ended up putting it in the Sunday edition. And I think should point out as a financial newspaper, from what I understand, like the Wall Street Journal or the Times.
It has different layouts. There's they have a youth part, which is that's actually a magazine, and then they have the daily newspaper, then they have a financial part. But Frankfurter Allgemeine, the company, I don't know if you can call it company, but the newspaper company itself, it's one of the biggest one, if not the biggest one, after Bild Zeitung in Germany, which is Bild is basically like Fox News in the States. You don't really read it unless you want to be entertained by bullshit. So yeah,
from what I understood, this was in the financial for some reason. And anyway, it was a more than a half-page article about just my experience here in Bangkok. And the fact that I had the jazz club was secondary, but they mentioned that. But it was just about my, an American having relocated to Bangkok and trying to survive on jazz.
How weird is that for you to see yourself in magazines? Because I know the BK magazine, and especially here in Bangkok, where everything is about food and bars, there's a lot of reviews and this kind of stuff. How hard is it to keep up with actually making them happy, making your audience happy, and making yourself happy? Because if the magazine writes shit about you, it kind of will influence your business later on. You know what I mean? And sometimes, sorry, but I met enough people who just don't know a shit about certain things sometimes. So when you want somebody to write about a jazz club in Bangkok and they have no idea about jazz, then they can come from a complete different angle. How hard is it to keep all this together and on the right level?
They usually don't write unless they come in and do interviews, and many of them have come and done interviews, and they usually get the story right. They ask the questions, and they're never too judgmental. There's one lady in particular who used to write for The Nation, and now she writes for a couple of other magazines. Her name is Manta, and she's very well known, and she actually puts out the most wonderful articles about the bar. And so that's been the experience more so than any criticism per se. There's not a lot to criticize, except that we haven't implemented food yet, but
or you're German, then you always have something to criticize. No, but I made a short switch here. On Thursday, I'm going to talk to my good friend Trevor Ranges, who is a big fan of bars. I'm going to bring him here. I was actually hoping to get him here due to the opening, but he was on a sober September, if you want to say so, because he writes a lot for bars and restaurants, so there's a lot of food and a lot of drinks involved. Sometimes you need to take a break. And talking about break, what do you do to actually take a break from it all? Do you go to the islands? Do you take advantage of the beautiful landscape in Thailand? Or what exactly do you do if you don't play music, are not in the bar, or watch football? Is there anything else that you would like to share?
I consider my whole life a break. So I never have the desire to go away for a vacation or a holiday. I travel as a part of my job. I just came back from 4 months in Ho Chi Minh City, but playing at the Sheraton Hotel. The experience at the hotel was bad, but the experience in Ho Chi Minh City was just to die for. My most favorite place now in Southeast Asia, Ho Chi Minh City. So 4 months like that, even though it's part of my job, it's still a vacation. It was wonderful. And then when I go to Singapore, or when I go to KL, China, 8 months in China, two different stints. And then twice I've gone to Europe for more than a month at a time. So all those are part of my work, and so it's getting away, but it's still within my work. And so I never really have a need for a vacation. I mean, the whole thing is a vacation for the past 15 years since I left the US.
I can just see a bunch of people out there, including my parents. Even though I love my parents, they are just sitting there right now and say, what did we do wrong? Because a lot of people, I can imagine, would be very happy to be able to say something like that, but not many people are. What can you say to people to actually take that fear away from them, to just drop everything and go for what you really want in life? Because it seems to be a big struggle for people.
Well, you better be ready for the financial sacrifice. It's not all, roses and whatever. You better be ready for the financial sacrifice. It's not for everybody. It depends on your personality and your passion. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But again, it depends on your relationship with wealth, with material things. Like I don't have any. I can move. I could leave Bangkok and not take anything except my laptop
and your trumpet
and my trumpet. But again, I don't even have to take the trumpet because there's another trumpet available somewhere else. So I'm not attached to material things. My partner, my romantic partner, she marvels at how much I throw things away when I'm finished. I just toss things. I'm not attached to things. So it's not a life for everybody.
Sorry to interrupt there, but how's that with your music? Because my audience is probably tired by this by now, because I talk about this a lot, but I recently cleaned my archive, and I used to save every picture I ever took, because I always thought you never know when that might come in handy. How's that with your music, that you either sing or you compose? How easy for you is it to actually throw something away and say, no, that was shit, I don't really need that? Or, hey, wait a second, maybe that can grow on me like in 5 or 10 years.
I've only composed 45 songs.
Only, he says.
Which, well, it's not a lot considering the number of years, because those 45 songs I probably wrote in about 4 or 5 months, and then I haven't written since, didn't write before, so it all came out at once. I could do it again, so there's not much for me to throw away. I haven't gotten to the recording part. I really want to. Again, it's a matter of finances and time to be able to buy good equipment, have a facility. When this club thing settles, then I'll have the things I need to. But so no, not been throwing away any project work per se. I was referring to just material things in your life.
Yeah, that's true.
Clothes, you get tired of clothes and shoes, and so I don't exactly throw them away. I say, here, I give them to somebody and give them to the cleaning staff in your condominium or whatever. But not, some people hoard things, and
I know exactly what you mean. I know a bunch of these people who can never throw away anything. Let it be, I don't know, an old pair of shoes or whatever it is.
Paper bags.
Huh?
Paper bags.
Paper bags, exactly. And that refers once again to Trevor coming up on Thursday, when we will be recording live from the 2 Magazine office and talk about plastic, because he's an editor, as I mentioned, and he's also a big guy, not a big guy itself, but he hates plastic. He has a big hate for plastic, and when we first talked, he went from using plastic to using less and less and less, and I think nowadays he lives completely without plastic, if that is even possible. I don't even know. Idris, we have been recording here for a little bit more than an hour, and it has been a pleasure to sit down and talk to you and hear about your passion about music and your jazz spot here, Black. Where can we find you on social media, and how can the people get in touch with you who want to follow or even want to book the whole place for themselves one day?
Well, on Facebook, of course, our page is Black Jazz Spot. The website is the same name, blackjazzspot.com. On Instagram, I'm just Idris Dawud. That would be IDRIS DAWUD. Again, not on Twitter yet, but from those first two, and of course we're on Google and TripAdvisor as well. So we're easy to find, and I hope a lot of people have been getting in touch with us via our Facebook page. We have instantly over 1,000 followers since the grand opening.
Yeah, you're somebody who replies fast too. You take your business very serious. Also the customer service. Maybe there's a little German inside of you.
That is another story. When I left here, to go live in Germany in 2006, and I stayed for a month. Stopped off in Spain for a while, in France, but then I lived in Berlin for a month because I just wanted to live in Germany.
Yeah, Berlin is the place to be for sure.
I have a long relationship with Germany that we could get into in another conversation.
Well, this is why I try to keep the podcast always between an hour, 1.5, because I'm always happy to come back. But something that I need to ask here before I let you go, because you said Spain and then you said Germany, how about Holland? Because Holland is a spot for jazz musicians, for very creative people in general. Have you ever been in Holland, Amsterdam, Red Light Radio, jazz? Jazz is a huge thing in Holland.
I've been dying to go there. It's just been something that just hasn't happened as a matter of luck. Whereas I've been to Germany about 5 or 6 times, and I've been to Spain 40 times.
It's literally right in between there.
It just hasn't happened for one reason or another.
Yeah. Well, hopefully one day we will hear you at one of the big jazz festivals in Amsterdam or around in Holland, because you need to put that on your to-do list, man. And here I said I am telling you what to do. I'm sorry, but it's just a place where you need to go. I know a lot of creative musicians over there, and I would be happy to connect, because networking and connecting creative people is what life is all about. Regarding your social media, Instagram, Twitter, you have to shoot your Twitter account to me later on when that is done. I'm a bad Twitter person, but yeah, I need to improve certain things. However, all the social media links from you and Black, they will be down below here in the description on our YouTube channel. So if you are listening on Podbean or iTunes or SoundCloud or Stitcher or make sure to switch to YouTube. You can find all the links down below in the description. And once you see them, click on them, give them a like, leave them a comment, come and visit the place, and then tell Idris what you think. How have the reviews been so far? Because I saw from your opening there were a lot of people writing, and including myself, I had nothing bad to say. Anything bad that came up, because I had a hostel once up in a time, and there's always one dickhead, and yes, I said dickhead, that just, again, has no idea and just had to write something bad. Have something like that come across?
We've had one, just like
you see,
said.
I knew it.
Everyone has given us 4 and 5 stars. Some local person who lives in Argentina, but he says he's Thai, lives in Argentina, which means he couldn't have visited the place. He gave us a 1 star, but no comment. But it just, in a way, that's a little bit satisfying, because it's bugged him for the right reason. It has bugged him it couldn't have been for the quality. But other than that, no, we've gotten great reviews on TripAdvisor. For my last bar, we actually were the number 2 nightlife spot in Bangkok, competing with even the dance clubs. So We've gotten nothing but great reviews.
Very impressive.
Knock on wood.
Very impressive. Knock on wood. We have wood here on the table. And yeah, you need, for me it's always, I don't really bother with people who do stuff like that, because let me put this another way. At least we did enough to get them interactive, and that's what you want people to be interactive with your spot, because bad or good, there is no such thing as bad press. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Talking from a media point. Idris, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. We hope to be back here in the near future. Come out and check the place out tonight. Are you going to play tonight?
No, we'll be here Friday with the band.
Mm-hmm.
Just solo piano for the next 3 nights.
Boom.
At 8:30.
Well, I will be here on the weekend, that is for sure, because I have a few weeks off, and why not spend this with good music? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Surrounded by Details podcast with me, Stevie. Stevie, Jesus, I can't believe I said this. Only my mom calls me Stevie. Stevo is my name. And if you want to get in touch with me or the podcast, please make sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel, SoundCloud, iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, wherever it's Surrounded by Details podcast. If you want to reach out personally to me, you have the social media such as Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. All Steve Bonhage, STEV BONHAGE, Steve without a E at the end. That is because my parents can't speak English. True story. And for everything else, just go and visit my website, www.stevebonhage.com. Here as well, STEVBONHAGE.com, in order to find the best fight photography in Asia, maybe the world, maybe even the universe. Who knows? Taste is different from person to person. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful week. That's all for today. We will be back on Thursday, I think 1 p.m. as well. It's an afternoon week here at the Surrounded by Details podcast with Trevor Ranges. And stay awesome and make somebody else happy. Smile at people you don't know. That always helps. I promise you that. Stay tuned. See ya.